Good morning, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good day, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, without further ado, let's get into the news. And why Biden had flown over to England to, I guess, pay the respects to the legit Queen. I mean, Queen Elizabeth. Not only was he embarrassed by being sat in the very back of the cathedral, maybe because it was easier to access to the bathrooms. We know last time he took an international trip, which he visited the Pope, he had an accident, so maybe they wanted to move him a little bit closer to the facilities to make sure there was no unintentional accidents, right? So his whole trip got off to a rough start while he was there. So the Brits love these Brits. Man, these are some base Brits here. We're chanting "Let's go Brandon" as his motorcade passed through, and it was a slow-moving motorcade. And you know, Brandon heard this dude was probably furious over the chanting of "Let's go, Brandon," because he knows what that means. He knows that many people in the world do not recognize him as President of the United States. They do not recognize him as the legitimate leader of this nation. And many people within our own country also hold the same views. And so when he was out there in England, as he was on his way to the Queen's funeral, yes, lots of Brits were lining the streets, and lots of "Let's go Brandon" chants were hurled toward his motorcade. What an epic fashion. So let's get to dive into what we have here. Coming to us via Twitter. This is from the Real Mac Report. I think this is let's take a look at real macro import good increases here for us. And it says this here, it says Joe Biden was heckled in 10 Downing Street, London with "Let's go Brandon," so we have to listen to it. Now. Let's take a listen. Jill was in the car. She was just fuming. She has to be fuming. Having listened to those chants of, "Let's go, Brandon. Let's go Brandon," because they know what it means. They know that they're not didn't know they're not popular, even though the mainstream media will sit there and go out and say that they have. He was the most popular person of all time to receive 80 trillion votes or whatever. It was even more popular than Barack Hussein Obama, back in 2008, who had received the most votes ever, as a presidential candidate. Somehow Biden was even more popular than Obama, that couldn't speak dude that was inside the basement for the entirety of the 2020 election cycle. Somehow he was the most popular individual out there. And, he's just seeing how popular he actually is, people chanting his name wherever he goes, because that dude probably thinks his name is Brandon. First, let's talk about the financial news that came out today. We have a very bad news when it comes to latest report having to do with housing. So we know that the entire economy is decimated, because we have a career politician who's never done a damn thing in his life to earn money. Significant money, never lead anything. And then has been a government public servant for several decades, other words, not adding value but living off of the taxpayers. The only way he was able to make money was paid for play schemes with his son Hunter. Homebuilder sentiments, and September fell 3 points to 46. And the National Association of Homebuilders Wells Fargo Housing Market Index. Okay, if you're not familiar with this is a scoring of the homebuilders' sentiment. It's kind of a score of showing the confidence going forward. Well, anything below 50 is considered negative, and it was on the line. And now it's fallen below that. Nearly a quarter of builders reported lowering prices as rates surged. And the Fed said they're gonna raise the rates again. So what happens? Of course, basic economics, if the interest rates rise, that means it's more expensive to borrow money, right? The price of borrowing money is called the interest rate. Well, if the interest rate goes up, that means you have to pay more in your monthly payment for the same amount. So let's say you want to buy a $250,000 property, and the interest rate is X. Well, then your payment, I'm just making numbers up here, folks. Okay, don't get caught up in the minutiae of it. But let's say it's $1,200. But then the interest rates go up to borrow that to pay for the same $250,000 is not going to cost you $1,500. So that means it's more expensive to buy that property, even though the price is the same. And what happens? That means less people can buy that property, and that drives the prices back down. Now, if you're a cash buyer, that's a good thing, right? So we'll go, oh, well, the housing market needs to cool off. Yeah, that's great if you're a cash buyer, but if you're like most people who we need a mortgage to pay for our homes, assuming we have one home, but collectively our homes, then that means that it's still tough to get a loan and to buy a property because now that $1,500 is going to buy a certain $50,000. And we can't afford that. Now we're looking at $200,000. And it's all around, not an ideal situation. Of course, this is on top of inflation or what have you. We want prices of properties to appreciate, organically, not because of monkeying with interest rates and other inflationary and other pressures on the markets that could have been avoided with a smart executive at the helm, like Donald John Trump. So we have the higher cost of land. Labor materials have made it harder for these builders to lower prices, but now they're going to be forced to, and that's going to wreak havoc. Now, I think Steve Cortes, the former advisor President Trump, put it best when he said it's not just a decline. It's an absolute implosion. So cash buyers' opportunities will start to arise very shortly. People with loans' interest rates will continue to increase, and that will decrease your purchasing power. Talk about decreasing in power. Joe Biden were late for the Queen's funeral today. And the world leaders went from the ceremony over to the state funeral at Westminster Abbey. And they all went in a bus together, right? So they all went to bus together and they kind of had joint security while the President of the United States cannot travel that way. He's got to be in the beast. He's got to have tons of vehicles around him. He has more security that does not allow him to be in a carpool of a bus. Well, as I reported this morning, Londoners were making fun of Joe Biden because he got stuck in traffic, and he wound up being late for the ceremony. We can't start it. So, Joe, someone's jokingly said they might have taken longer Nigel's because he got stuck in traffic because it took Jill a long time to dress Joe for the event. That being said, here is what The Guardian is reporting. He may be the world's most powerful man, but the apparent late arrival of Joe Biden and his wife was not allowed to disrupt the finely tuned choreography of the late Queen's funeral. Rather than being ushered immediately to their seats on their arrival, they had to be gently told that they had to wait for the procession, which had already started. Okay, now. After an awkward period of small talk at the main entrance as those award of the highest decoration of the military valor went ahead, the Bidens finally followed in the wake of Victoria Crossholder, Johnson Bihari pushing the wheelchair of Keith Payne. Now, here's the breakdown. The president sat directly behind Duda on Andrzej Duda, the Polish leader directly in front of Peter Fiala, the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic. And he was way ranked below, he was in the 14th row. The Emperor, and in front of them were reappointed royals and the King of Jordan. There was about 2,000 mourners from around the world at Westminster Abbey. Now this is where Trump trolling comes in. And we're talking hardcore Trump trolling. Trump said the following, let me have it right here. Here we go. Trump said, "This is what's happened to America in just 2 short years. No respect, however. A good time for our president to get to know the leaders of certain third world countries. 14 rows back, folks, does oppose a leader of the free world. Some will say, James, you're being harsh on Biden, he got there late. Do you think if Trump were in charge that would have happened? He would have? He's a businessman. Now he can't control traffic, but I think they would have known, hey, maybe we need to leave the previous event a little early or skip it or what have you. There's no way for the optics alone. If you believe that Trump is an egomaniac, then you shouldn't believe this is what I'm saying to be true. He would not have wanted to sit on the 14th row and would have made sure that he was on time to the event. Everything is Mickey Mouse and third rate with this regime, you don't believe me? Look at who their press secretary is, Karina Jean-Pierre. And what a laughable job she does on the job. She makes Jen Psaki look like the best press secretary ever. So President Trump trolling him saying, hey, a good time for our president to get to know the leaders of certain third world countries. If I were president, they wouldn't have sat me back there and our country will be much different than it is right now. And we all know that to be true. But that wasn't all. He later truth out in real estate, like in politics and in life. Location is everything. Well, Joe Biden must have been really nearly humiliated. Or maybe it was time for him to go immediately after the event. Jumped on to Air Force One. Alright. Michael Lindell has put the deep state on notice. He did it first this morning with an exclusive interview with the Western Journal. And he said that he would be suing the FBI. Now let me play you what he told Steve Bannon this morning. And then Melindo the armor-piercing show. You're going to break some news today. Everyone listen to this. I've never the audience. Obviously this audience loves you and support you. Tell us what's going on. While everybody I've been on the phone with the day for the last 3 hours with some of the best. Where's the country? Alan Dershowitz out? Andrew Parker, Kurt Olson amongst others. What can we do with what happened on with seizure of my ponies FBI corruption, and we are suing. Is your hearing in here? First everybody we're suing the United States government and the FBI. Okay. Suing the United States government and the FBI. Folks see that they do is they actually crush people. The CIA, the FBI, the DOJ, they come after you, they come after me. What are we going to do? We don't have the resources, the millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend ourselves when the United States government, they have the taxpayer money, they didn't just spend, and crush you to death. But when they mess with someone like President Trump or Michael Sandel, who granted his because of the crashing of the wokeness, and the council culture, has lost a little bit of wealth, but he's still a very, very wealthy and successful man. He has more the resources to do this. Plus he has a name recognition to get people like Alan Dershowitz and others to cooperate and play ball with him legally. So this is huge. We should be seeing this happen if it hasn't happened. His First, Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights were broken. Let's do a quick reminder of what those are. Okay. His First Amendment right. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So they were going after his phone, supposedly having to do with an investigation into, let's say, some fraudulent activity that took place a couple years ago. Allegedly, we're on YT. So I have to say, alleged ID, but I'm talking about right from a couple years ago, and where they looked at some information, and now they're saying that it was identity theft, and all kinds of crazy things, right? Well, that was all in an effort to petition the government for redress of grievances, a huge grievance from a couple years ago. If all of these things we see, which appear to be true, are true, then there was a huge injustice, and we should be able to petition our government for redress of that grievance. Also, these things were reported. And we have the right of the freedom of the press, and are the people to peaceably assemble to present this information. Then he says his Fourth Amendment rights, and of course, they seized his phone. And they haven't, folks, they haven't charged him with anything yet. This is all optics. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers and effects against unreasonable search and seizures, shall not be violated. That's the short version of it. But since we're having a civics lesson, then me continue the whole verbiage. And no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, and the persons or things to be seized. Fifth Amendment. What we think of the Fifth Amendment, of course, you think about, I'm going to plead the Fifth, so I don't self-incriminate. But it's more than that. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and be informed in the nature of the cause of the accusation. He has not been charged with anything. To be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for, my goodness gracious, folks, I'm sorry. I get upset when it doesn't sound like that's the Sixth Amendment I gave you, which, of course, is one of the other things he's going. Let's go back to the Fifth. No person shall be held or answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, unless to a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in case arising in the land of naval forces and military stuff. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor to be deprived of life, liberty or property without the due process of law. Mike Mandel contesting here that he did not get due process. They took his phone away. It didn't have to do it that way. And from what he told the Western Journal is that he has lost a lot of business. And people have backed out of business dealings with him because of this, of which he hasn't even been accused of a crime, hasn't been charged as a crime. The whole thing was optics. 4 out of 5 businesses that partner with Lindell back out of a deal after winning of the FBI's involvement in Lindell's affair. Lindell claims 4 of them called me and said, "Mike, we don't want to do business with you now that the FBI is involved." That's what he told the Western Journal. "People now perceive that I've committed some kind of crime or done something wrong." AA Bank also pressured one of Lindell's MyStore.com partners into ending the partnership as well because of the FBI. And now Mike Rendell is going to sue the hell out of them. One of the banks for these guys back that, "So we're not going to give you money because of Mike Lindell." Now the FBI is stopping him, because the FBI was stopping him for his phone. And as I reported, they seized his phone while we're sitting in a drive-thru in Minnesota, a Hardee's last week, or we could go tomorrow. So he is going to sue their pants off. And vicariously that is good for the rest of us. Okay, let's get into this whistleblower story. What is the conspiracy that the FBI and the DEA is trying to do against us? They've been trying to cast a wide net that anyone who has certain doubts about certain things that took place, a certain 2 years ago, as domestic violent extremism. And there's an epidemic of it. We've heard Christopher Wray and others say this is the biggest problem, essentially. While there's a whistleblower that's saying the FBI has schemed to distort the January 6th case, to make it seem like there's a nationwide domestic violence extreme Muslim epidemic, all by design, folks. A whistleblower has accused the FBI as a Washington field office of using cases related to the January 6th U.S. Capitol event to overstate the threat of domestic violent extremism in America. Ms. According to Judiciary Committee, Ranking Member Representative Jim Jordan, once again Jim Jordan doing the heavy lifting. The whistleblower alleged the FBI office did not follow the standard investigation practices for the January 6th cases when they moved the cases to various local field offices around the country based on where the case subjects were from. Of course, Jordan is revealing this in a letter addressed once again to FBI Director Chris Wray. January 6th cases should be officially led by the Washington field office and categorized as WFO cases according to letter, but instead a task force dispatch instructions to open genuine 6 investigations to local field offices nationwide. These local offices received the cases, making it look like they were conducting investigations on the cases when in reality, the Washington field office continued to conduct the bulk of the work according to the letter. So they just farmed this out to make it look like on paper there's all these investigations nationwide. But it's the same treatment's trainers, rat bastards in DC running the whole operation. Ladies and gentlemen, give me your thoughts below. And hit subscribe.